So if there is climate, I know what. Okay, folks, it is that time. This is UTA. If you're here for something else or get bored by TLS, you know, find something else to do. And I guess we have Alexei in the house, so it means we can get started. So you'll notice that I'm up here all by my lonesome today, and that's because my co-chair couldn't make it here for personal reasons. So be gentle. The blue sheets are going round, and I'll ask your help to keep an eye on the Meet Echo queue, because you know a little bit of a wide angle view up here. So you've all seen the note well. You know what it means. Take care. We have a pretty packed agenda today, so we're going to have to sort of speed up and keep to our times. I thought I actually would start with a quick look at, let's see if I can do that. A quick look at our document status, even though it's sort of big. Let's see if that works. All right, something like that. As you all know, we've published a few RFCs in this working group. We have a few active drafts in the email field, and one of them is in the working group last call, the TLS reporting draft. We're going to do a quick, hopefully a quick discussion on the KV versus JSON issue today. And we're also going to do a run through of deep. And let's see if I can get this back in full screen. And we're also going to do a quick update on the required TLS draft. As I stood up and said in SAG, I think after we get the email work done and we can sort of see that on the horizon, there isn't that much sort of obviously left for the working group to do. So if you in your various networks know about people who are thinking about bringing stuff to UTA, tell them it's time to do that right away, certainly before Singapore. All right. I haven't actually put any time on the agenda for discussion on TLS reporting because it is in working group last call. If you do have things there, send it to the mailing list. So with that, let's see, do we have some of the people from the UTA, MTA, STS draft? They are on Meet Echo. So guys, would one of you like to step up to the remote queue and talk about the proposal that you guys put together for KV? Let's see if anybody is awake over there. Otherwise, feel free to step up to the microphone and discuss this issue. My hope and expectation is that we can have a consensus call in the next 15 to 20 minutes about this issue. And this is the last issue that's holding up the STS draft.
Chris Newman, one point I wanted to make about the consensus call for KV versus JSON is do make sure you ask the question of the people who don't care which of the two outcomes are chosen.
That's a good point. Thank you. And just for formality's sake, I will note that the current draft says JSON, which means that a change to KV implies a working group consensus, which means that if we don't have consensus, we stay with JSON.
So I was...
yes,
yeah,
say
sure.
your name.
Maarten Aartsen, NCSCNL. So I read the security considerations for the STS draft, and I have a question about that. I get the feeling that there's a difference in the security you get if you use TOFU between having a lot of mail and seeing a lot less mail. And that's not the case for Start Tls Dane. So it is a difference, and the start of the document points to the security section as the section which discusses some of the differences. So I was wondering if there's interest in including that, because it might not be obvious to everyone deciding between these two protocols, because that's basically, it's a competitor, right?
Alexei Melenkov, I think text contributions are welcome. Send them to the mailing list.
Absolutely.
And then, if it's good text.
So, Rich, can you, is anybody awake over at the STS people on Jabber, see if they can sort of, if they have anything to say about this issue? Because right now it seems like the right time to ask about, it would be a good time to ask who actually cares about this issue. All right. So there, in the absence of vigorous discussion here, I'm just going to do get a sense of the room about the KV versus JSON issue. So as you've all seen, the draft authors proposed alternative text that had an alternative representation of the same data that goes in the current JSON format. So you made a good point there, Chris. Who in the current, who here or on Jabber or remote have read both proposals? A few? All right. Of those of you who have actually read this, do you have does anybody have a strong preference about either of these?
It appears that some people remotely are having difficulties with stability.
Oh, okay. Can you suggest that they channel through Jabber instead, and we'll just have to do that. We're not actually dependent on Meet Echo here. So there doesn't seem to be strong preference either way. All right, Cincy. Maybe we should have done this towards the end of the session when people have had the chance to debug their environments. Again, if people don't express a strong opinion and argue the case, Victor is stepping up. Excellent. So
hi, I just joined, so I didn't hear the question even. Are we discussing key value or something?
Yes, the question on the table is, given the proposal that is on the table for a key value representation, do people care? Strongly, not at all?
So
is it worse?
It looks better to me.
All right. So we have one
yes
voice.
You probably will get turned on.
Right. Right.
When he opens it up,
I'm not hearing strong consensus, actually.
I've heard some private complaints from Murray, but he's not here, so,
Well, we'll obviously confirm on the list, right? But I think this, the sense in this room is that most people don't seem to care either way, which is fine.
I think this is a bit of a, well, it's not quite bike shed, but the format is unlikely to be extended unless people have examples. So I think the point about, part of the decision to help us is how likely this is going to be extended and what kind of data we're going to see there. one question is, does it have to have like values with UTF-8, for example, and or not? That might not affect the format very much, but this sort of questions.
All right. So Victor, for your and for everybody who might be joining late, and it'd be helpful if you reflected this on the average. So it is. This is the time to speak up if you have strong opinions about this. If you don't have any strong opinions either way, then we can do whatever, we'll do what the working group wants. And right now that is to keep it as it is. That's my interpretation of this. Well, we may have to take this to the list if there isn't enough sort of.
One question to ask is ask reverse question: who will not implement this if this is X?
Right. That's what I meant by saying strong feeling. Asking for people to have strong feelings about this. I'm assuming that if you feel strongly enough to say I will never implement a JSON version, that's having strong feelings about this. All right, so it doesn't seem like we can profitably sort of conclude this here, but to me it sounds like we don't have strong consensus to make a change. We'll confirm that on the list. That may change depending on who actually turns up for a discussion on the list. I think that's all we can actually do here. There is open mic later, so if people want to get back to this, we can do that. So Keith, let's see if we can get let's see if I can find your presentation among my windows. Here it is. All right. Now for something completely different.
Okay, so curious as to how many people have read -07 of this document. And okay, so it is a pretty substantial rewrite. A lot of text is borrowed from the previous version, but it's fairly rearranged because of some feedback we got in Chicago that said that this should be a BCP. So I tried to make it a BCP. Go ahead and change slides.
Oops, too many. There we go.
So I tried to make it a BCP, and I'm not really sure I was successful because making the document a BCP pretty much meant taking out all the protocol bits. And Chris argues, and I think I agree with him, that I actually left some protocol bits in there, but that's kind of a bit risky, I think, because things that are actually protocol should be on the standards track so they can be subject to interoperability tests and that kind of critical review. But this was an attempt to rewrite the document as a BCP. The biggest change is that the STS stuff has now been removed. I did get a little feedback in private mail that said that they didn't, the person said, our company is not likely to implement this because of the STS stuff. It's just not enough value for us. And I was wondering if a lot of the sort of pushback on that document was from the STS stuff, which I think is useful, but maybe not so much needed in the near term. So anyway, it's not in version 07. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay, go ahead. Yeah. So it's the same goal. If anything, I actually tried to make the statement a little bit clearer. Basically, clear text for interactions between the mail user agent and the mail service provider should be considered obsolete in most cases. There are some corner cases for which you'll still need to do it if you're dealing with legacy clients or appliances that can't be upgraded. But I can't, aside from those corner cases, it seems like the best current practice really is you should encrypt this traffic. You should encrypt it using TLS. And we will argue further, you should probably do this using implicit TLS. Although if you use Start Tls, that's still okay. And I guess the other bit is that there's still the text in there about port 465. as sort of the best way forward to use submission over TLS. So there's still sort of a conflict over that port, but the language hasn't changed. So next slide. So in summary, the best current practices for mail service providers: provide implicit TLS versions of the services, also provide Start TLS versions, at least in the near term, advertise these services using DNS serve records, advertise the TLSA records if they're signed by DNSSEC so that they can use DANE, and deprecate, in quotes, clear text mail services as soon as practicable. So that if you're a mail service provider, this is sort of saying you should wean your users off of clear text mail services. But what that means is up to you. It depends on your business and your business cases. And transition users to TLS 1.1 or later as soon as practicable. Okay, and for mail user agents, support serve record discovery for discovering configurations, except you should prefer TLS to non-TLS. You should try to set up a configuration which actually encrypts the traffic. And this notion of a minimum level of confidentiality is still in there, although it's a bit simplified from version 6. But basically, you should, if you're expecting confidentiality for this mail account, you should require at least TLS 1.1 and have a valid certificate. And if you've got the mail account configured to require this confidentiality level, then you shouldn't, if you don't get those conditions, you shouldn't try to read mail right then. Shall I finish, or you want to go ahead?
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, it's a clarifying question from Jim. What is the motivation for DNS serve records? Is there a security benefit?
For if you're doing DANE, yes. And I think that requirement is specific. Where you're encouraged to use DNS. Oh, sorry, you said DNS serve, and I heard DNSSEC. Sorry. DNS serve records is just a discovery mechanism to help mail user agents find the right services to use for this particular mail service provider. So I think it's useful, and we want to encourage its use, and it can help you find the TLS versions of these services. That's the benefit. And then, okay, so back to where I was. If you're not requiring this minimum level of confidentiality on a mail account, then you're still encouraged to use opportunistic encryption. And if you're a mail user agent and you find that this set of mail services provides TLS, then you're encouraged to offer the user a chance to upgrade to require that confidentiality rather than just do it opportunistically. And I think that's it. That's the summary of the changes. Of course, the document goes into more detail.
You're on, Chef. I haven't been following the list, so I apologize in advance. And let me know if you've beaten this horse to death. TLS 1.1 is kind of strange. RFC 7525 insists on TLS 1.2. In the browser world, there's barely people doing TLS 1.1. People are either on 1.0 or 1.2. So have you had this discussion?
No, I don't think we've had the discussion, and it might be that our information is just a little bit old. If TLS 1.2 is being sort of aggressively recommended, I think we'd like to reflect that.
So
okay.
Yes.
So that's good feedback. Okay.
Neil Jenkins. Just having a quick look at that, on the implicit TLS versus Start TLS thing, I agree it should recommend implicit TLS is better. There's less chance that passwords and credentials get sent in accidentally clear text. With regards to being able to do Start TLS kind of for now, I don't actually think IMAP or POP, any clients are doing Start TLS with that. It's only really SMTP, whereas the draft seems to be referring to all three.
You don't think that's I mean, I certainly know of clients.
TLS and implicit TLS all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's sometimes it's hard to tell from the way the configuration options because they never say Start TLS. So it's like
over the port 143 and
yeah,
and
that's
stuff like that.
one thing that happens.
Really? Okay.
You can't even upload, if you're popping your mail, if you're on Comcast and you're popping it out of Google, for example.
Fine.
Yeah.
Okay, hang on, Chris. I'm going to let Victor in.
On the same topic, this is Victor Duchovny. We've spent about a decade and a half now, at least in the postfix community, training users to do submission on 587. I don't think it's anything we'll quickly be able to reverse. So I'm not seeing a rapid migration back to 465 as anything remotely plausible. I think 587 is here to stay for a long time. As for Start TLS, for IMAP, it's used and supported. It's out there. 143 with Start TLS works. Mutt supports it, for example, which I use. So I don't know that we need to tell people whether to use 465 or 587. They can make up their own minds. 587 works just as well. It's just an extra round trip, but otherwise equally secure if you actually configure it for TLS.
If you would like to suggest text, I'd be happy to do that. I think you're right in that we're going to see a lot of use of both ports for some time to come. And I think that sort of settling on the TLS port is a good way forward, just in general, for all protocols, actually. But, again, if you have improvements to the text in the current document, those happen.
Right. As for TLS, I agree 1.2 is fine these days. There's very few clients that even support 1.1 and don't support 1.2. It's just not that common.
Okay.
So just speaking to the Start TLS thing, if we want to like drill down, I mean, I think, supporting Start TLS on 587 is probably a good idea for the near term, particularly for servers. For IMAP and POP, I'm not sure servers should bother with Start TLS in the future. I mean, if they don't already do it, why bother now? What's deployed, if you go look at the ISPs out there, survey the ISPs, IMAP-S and POP-S are much more widely implemented than Start TLS on IMAP and POP. So for those two protocols, if we wanted to drill down in the details, we could say, servers shouldn't bother doing this if they haven't already done it. Yeah. But for SMTP, I think Victor's right that it's not going to go away in the near term.
All right. Well, I think you were before Jim. So.
Okay. Aronzana, just a comment on the earlier comment with regard to the TLS version. The best current practice document recommending TLS 1.2 is even from this working group, so I think we should adhere to that. I haven't read this document, but because I've been out of the loop from UTA for like the last 6 months, but I'll do so and provide comment on the mailing list. Thanks.
Yeah.
Hi.
Okay, so
kind of expanding on my clarifying question from a little bit earlier.
Jim's up. Okay, go ahead.
With regard to SRV records, I'm certainly a fan of SRV records for service discovery and all that. I just wonder if the requirement is a little bit misplaced in this draft, since we're talking about practices for the use of TLS, something that's primarily involved with service discovery seems like it's a little bit out of place here.
I think my response would be, well, there's a published RFC that recommends this practice as a way to discover things, and I don't know of a better way to do it, although I think a number of mail client vendors have come up with their own sort of databases for widely used services.
Neil Jenkins, I think the idea, as I understood it, although maybe this is not fully expressed in the draft, is that clients that are currently set up on insecure connections could automatically detect that this domain has a secure option and then offer to upgrade it. And without the auto-discovery mechanism, people would have to manually do that,
Okay,
which
that
is
makes
possible
sense
if the
to me.
service
Thanks.
vendor really tries hard, but it's a lot more work.
Concur. Okay.
Okay, the one other issue I wanted to raise about this is the status of the document. I really think this is a standards track document. It's about 1/3 standards track, 2/3 BCP, but as a whole, it's a good document. I do think removing the STS from this spec made it a better spec. So good job editing this one. Keith edited this round of it. But I think this is a standards track document. It's registering a port. It's prescribing rules for client certificates so that you have interoperability. It's got a bunch of protocol stuff in there, and so I think it's standards track. And I wanted to see if anybody had a strong feeling the other way.
And I'll say I concur with Chris. I mean, having tried to make it a BCP, I really didn't feel like I could take out all of the protocol bits and not lose some very important details. So I feel like a standards track document can make recommendations about practice, but a BCP can't really define protocol because then it's not subject to the same process. The substantive objections I had were to the STS part, and that part is removed. So I really would like a kind of consensus call to see if the group is okay with making this a standards track document.
All right. Does there AD have any opinions here, or otherwise I'm fine with making that consensus call.
I think standards track is fine.
Mm.
I'm not even sure that asking the question is very meaningful, to be honest. I mean, maybe I'm just, we spent half an hour in the morning asking, discussing another document whether it's experimental standard track. So
well, I mean,
would like to speed up the discussion a bit, but if you want to ask the question, that's fine.
I mean, it can't hurt. I don't think it hurts. So hum for making the document a standards track document as opposed to a BCP or informational. All right, hum now if you do not believe we should make this a standard track document but should use another designation. All right, pretty clear consensus. So.
Yeah, and also Jim was in favor.
Yeah, all right. I think that's clear consensus right there. Oh, no.
Matthew Miller. I just want to point out, it's already marked as standards track.
Absolutely.
It's just in the header, it's saying BCP.
Yeah.
No, I guess I didn't change all of the pieces,
right.
but when I rewrote it, I tried to rewrite it as BCP, and I may have missed something.
But we did actually have that this discussion, and it wasn't clear from the working group discussion whether we actually made a consensus call last time to change it or not, right? So I think it was a good idea to confirm.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions or discussions about this?
Question from ID to authors. Do you think it's ready for working group plus call?
I think I'll make a quick rev based on feedback here and maybe today, and I'd love to get this into working group last call like next week.
All right. So rev, and I think you're right. I think we can do a working group last call on this as soon as you read it. All right. Okay. Good.
I think, having all three documents in ISG review at the same time would be nice. I mean, it's not required, but I think that would be nice.
All right. Jim, are you...
Sorry, one last, Rob Sonneveld. It's about deep. I think the port 465 issue, is that an obstacle to go to last call?
Well, my response on the 465 issue is, the text in there I think is clear and correct, and it's basically, if the ISG agrees with that text, it should go forward as is, and if the ISG hates that text, then we'll have to go back and rework it.
That's why we have ISG review and the IETF last call.
I mean, this is something, if it gets punted back, what's there is what I think is right, what I think the working
as long as the working group is fine with it, then so if you're making an objection on the content of it, so in that case, if you have a process objection, I don't think we don't need to worry about that.
Yeah, and I think the document is very clear that there is a potential problem there, so it will probably come up during last call, IETF last call anyway. At least it will likely to come up during GenArt and SecDo reviews and or whatever. So
we're a long road ahead. So Jim, are you ready to step up to the Meet Echo mic? And yeah, here we go.
Good, thank you. I can see them on mine.
All right, I got
so
your
I'm just going to go.
Queued
this
up.
is, I think, a 5-minute slot, so I'm going to try and fly through a few slides here. Go on the next slide. I just want to kind of review for everybody, what Require TLS is trying to do. Basically this is addressing the opportunistic aspect of Start TLS from the sender side as opposed to from the recipient domain policy side. Next slide. And so the idea is that it's fine-grained. You specify it on a particular message, and we have some control over the way that you express some requirements with respect to how certificates are verified, and it's an MTA to MTA only sort of thing. Next slide. And the approach is that there's a service extension called Require TLS, and you specify it, you negotiate it like you do with other service extensions. And if you have specific TLS requirements on a message, then you attach the Require TLS option to mail from. It isn't policy based, and the requirements follow the message. Next slide. Okay. What's new about it? Really very little. I haven't had time really since Chicago to do basically any work on Require TLS, but I consider that this solves an important problem, and it's something that my commitments are changing, and I do intend to return to in terms of at least the document, if not working with a couple of implementers that we have. Next slide. So here's my ask basically is, can we adopt this as a working group document? I believe that it solves a different problem because it's sender side and much more fine grained. We have a couple of implementations, so there is some maturity to the spec, and I believe that it's consistent with the goals of the working group. And that's really the key slide for the presentation. I just wanted to kind of tee it off with a little bit of background first. So that's it.
Question for the people in the room and remote who has read the draft. See a couple of hands. All right. So I'm going to actually ask the. Did you get any hands on Java? Okay. So still not a huge number of reviews, but I'm going to ask the adoption question anyway. I think this is actually in scope for the working group. So Jim read it. Well, excellent. Right. So I'm going to do a hum now on working group adoption of the required TLS draft. So hum now if you believe that working groups should adopt the draft. Hum now if you're opposed. All right. that's also very clear consensus. So, Jim, why don't you give me a day or
Wonderful.
two to
Thank you very
confirm
much.
on the list, and then we can you can resubmit a working group version of the document. All right. Now, that is, let's see here. In our agenda, that is actually it. We're at open mic now. Couple of points. I did mention that we should be thinking about our sunsetting this group. We are heading towards working group last call for most of our documents, and we have required TLS. You know, it will mean that we're around for 1 or 2 meetings more, but maybe not that many. And me and Orit have discussed what we could or should do next, and we put out our feelers. There is nothing obviously coming down the pipe. So this is, feel free to tell me I'm wrong.
Mark Risher and Alex Bowman said that since they've been like bad with stable Nidoco, they want to know if we can discuss JSON versus STS key values.
Absolutely, and this is open mic. You go ahead. Oh, hang on. So, Daniel, just give me a second. Barry, go ahead.
It's Barry Leva. Just for a second, back to Jim's document on how long you expect this to take. My sense is that we ought to be able to put a milestone for this as September, maybe October at the latest.
Yeah.
So this isn't going to extend.
Exactly. I agree.
Good.
All right. So finally, we have people on the Meet Echo queue willing to talk. Daniel? I show you at the mic. I'm not hearing anything. Yeah. So, Daniel, do you mind if I sort of put you to the end of the queue and let Victor try this? All right.
So about STS, you've heard my support for the KV already. I'm the main culprit for that argument. So I'm not going to discuss that further for the moment. I just want to point out that there's one issue we also haven't quite closed on, and perhaps I've failed to explain it properly to everybody. But it seems to me that there isn't currently a clean way to discontinue an STS policy. And I've tried a number of times to motivate a special value of max age 0 as signaling that the STS policy should be deleted from any cache that encounters a max age 0 cleanly without lots of warnings about failing to connect to the HTTPS resource or not finding stuff there, and various other ways of trying to flush it out that don't look nearly as robust to me. So I think we should try and get closure around that. Now, somehow it seems that Daniel and I have been speaking different languages, and neither of us understands what the point that the other one's making. So I don't know how we close it, but we should try and get some sort of common understanding on this one as well.
Yeah, Daniel says he's tried to post a couple times. He has posted a couple times on the list on how he thinks it works, and yeah, maybe they're speaking English.
Right. So I'm going to go back to my go-to here and say, Victor, do you think that you can provide specific test fix suggestions that clarifies the language around this?
Sure, I could probably write a thing that motivates having this thing and see if we can get the point across.
Right. You just sort of make it a specific text suggestion for the draft in the context of the draft, right? So we can sort of have a discussion about a concrete ways it helps.
Okay.
Victor, I'm gonna thank you, Mark. Let's see here.
Is it working to me?
Go ahead.
Like that? I'm trying. Any sounds coming?
Mark, you gotta turn up the microphone volume or something at your end because we can barely hear you.
I'm trying also. Having the same problem.
Mark?
Yes, do you not hear me?
Turn the volume up.
Tried.
Oh, okay. Maybe, Mark, you can channel through Rich Schultz.
Coming up.
All right.
We wrote up a key value option for SDS. And would like to close this issue.
Right. Now, I don't know whether you guys heard me when we sort of had this on the earlier in the meeting. And I think at this point, there is not clear consensus to make a change. I think we've heard Victor express a strong preference for, at least a preference for the KV format. There are very few people who are stepping up to oppose that, or to say other things, or to even support that. I think we need, in order to change this, and I'm going to say this one more time, in order to change what the draft says now, people actually have to express their opinions clearly. And I would even prefer it as chair if you could, those people who prefer to stay with what we have could express that too. It actually helps to form and to judge consensus.
Mark says, we're pretty neutral. On the one hand, KB is ready, but requires custom parsers. JSON's also ready and requires third-party parsers, which is either a plus or minus, we being the authors. Also, Aaron emphasized that he's been out of the loop for 6 months. He'll come back, read the doc, and also express. Oh, there it is. Okay, sorry.
So I'll repeat another question I posed earlier and see if it sticks. Does anybody care strongly about this to say I will not implement either of the options? And specifically directing this to vendors and implementers in the room and otherwise. Actually, it's important.
So in postfix, at least, if this is to be a standard feature that's shipped with the base release of the software, I don't think I can include the JSON dependency. It could be an add-on, people optionally compile, whatever. But if it's to be provided as a standard part of the software, I think JSON is not so good.
Mark says Google has an implementation and it'll be ready in a couple of weeks. They're redoing it. Redoing it with KV will slow us down somewhat, but it's not a deal breaker. We're just trying to play ball.
All right. I think that's exactly where we were at the last meeting. Yep. So we'll have to resolve this on the mailing list unless people want to stand up and make more arguments.
I think there was +1 for a key value pairs from somebody else on the mailing list, but I think a lot of people
just don't care.
Yeah. Well, I also happened to ask Chris, and he actually privately said that he prefers JSON, but he doesn't care enough, so he can find either way.
Chris Newman, just for humor value, I just did a word count on the key value parser and the JSON parser library in my code base, and the JSON parser is smaller. The key value parser handles a bunch of variant key value formats, so that's why it's larger. But anyway, it's this is not a significant amount of code.
Right.
Chris, is there a specific KV parser you're endorsing?
Both the JSON parser and KV parser in our product I wrote. So, one's like 500 something lines, the other's 600 lines, and it's like,
It's a massive difference.
Yeah.
All right. I don't see us making more progress in this meeting. Any opinions?
I suggest you have a 1 week call on the mailing list saying that there is no change unless a lot of people come up saying that they cannot live with JSON.
Yeah, I think that's it.
And I think it might be worth emphasizing that, yeah, actually you can implement JSON parse. I mean, as a reminder that you don't actually have to use third-party library.
Yep. All right, I think that's exactly what we're going to do. All right, because we really need to close this issue and get on with our lives.
Yeah, Mark agrees 1 week.
Yeah, a week it is. But I'll send that out in an announcement on the list on that. All right. So that means we're at open mic, and we actually had a request from Yaron. Do you want to stand up and ask us about something related to cert pinning, I think?
Exactly. So Daniel Migaud and I'm Yaron Sheffer, published a draft called ticket pinning, which uses something similar to TLS session resumption tickets to pin the server's identity. Well, think of it as certificate pinning with some twist. 2 twists, actually. One is this is easier to automate than HPKP. HPKP is an RFC on certificate pinning that has not seen wide adoption, to say the least. And the other twist is this is at the TLS level as opposed to HPKP, so it may be appropriate for other protocols that are not HTTP, like IMAP, SMTP, or whatever you guys are working on. So if people are interested, please talk to us. I will send out email with the details of the draft and have a word with Daniel and me. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we may get a presentation on this on future working group meetings. All right, Barry.
This is Barry Leba. Maybe I missed the follow-up to it, but Victor proposed using a max age of 0 on MTA STS to cancel the STS, and I didn't hear a result of that.
Oh, the result was that Victor agreed to produce text.
Produce text, okay.
On that.
Because I support that. It's consistent with what HTTP STS does, and
All
I
right.
support that. So.
All right, good. So, Victor, don't forget to send that text. All right. That means that we'll probably be a couple of more months before we can working group last call this document, or maybe a month, something like that. All right. Anything else? Or you will get maybe 10 minutes back? 11, 12 minutes, maybe? All right. Thank you all for coming. I suppose I'll see some of you or all of you in Singapore. If somebody didn't sign the blue sheet, please do so.